I've been looking forward to sharing a Pentecostal thought with you today, and in preparation for doing that, what I'd like to do is to set the stage a little bit, particularly to set the stage on this critical distinction between the words that we might choose to express something versus the words of the heart. They're different. They're not the same thing. And Pentecost is all about that difference. So let me start by asking you to cast your mind back, and for some of you it's perhaps as a sibling. For many of you it's as a parent. And for many of you it might be as a grandparent or even a great-grandparent. But do you remember the moment, the first moment, you laid eyes on your child? Or your grandchild, or perhaps your niece or your nephew? Do you remember that first moment? What did you feel when you laid eyes on that child? And tell me, did you have a choice in what you felt at that moment? I'm sure what you felt was just incredulous, unbounded joy. A miracle. Yours. And in that instant, your heart will have shared with every other heart that's enjoyed that moment of endless and unconditional love. Forever. That child, that grandchild, niece or nephew, it doesn't matter whether they succeed, it doesn't matter if they fall down, it doesn't matter. They're yours. And you'll love them forever, to the very limit of your soul. And even you dads out there, as some of you happen to be present at the moment, in the day that I was born, most of the dads are out in the waiting room kind of waiting for the baseball game, you know, praying this is going to be over before the baseball game got going. But for those of you that were there, and maybe you felt a little kind of on the sidelines and a little foolish and a little bit inadequate, I know I did. But did you feel anything less when Junior arrived? Maybe you saw it as a reflection in your partner's eyes. But I bet you felt it in your heart too. And for your grandparents and siblings who labored not to deliver this child, was your gift any less complete? Will your gift of love ever fade? So tell me, as newly arrived in your midst, what did this child do to receive your eternal love? As a parent, a grandparent, a relative, a sibling. What did that child do in advance? Absolutely nothing. And it didn't matter. Were there any conditions to your love at the point that it was liberated? No. Could you ever have anticipated what you felt at that moment, particularly before the first such child arrived? Could you ever have possibly premeditated that? You know, organized it in your head, intellectualized it, administered it, got all your ducks in a row, and figured it all out beforehand? No. It came over you like a wave, like a tsunami. So if it wasn't premeditated, then it wasn't a product of the intellect, was it? And if it wasn't a product of the intellect, then it's a product of the heart. What we're talking about here is the oratory of the heart. And when the heart speaks, it speaks eternal, forever. When it speaks a common unspoken language, a message that all of us feel the same, even though we might choose mortal words differently to try and describe it. We might say it in different tongues. En français, it doesn't matter. English, Spanish. We heard these languages today in the children's talk. We try our best to express that speaking of the heart in mortal words, and we've done that for ages and ages through poetry, we've done it through song, we've done it in theater and in verse, but somehow it always seems to come up different for sure, and maybe a little bit short. The gospel today for Pentecost is about that. It's about a community of Christians standing in unison of heart to express the glory of God, having been filled with the Holy Spirit. But what happened is it came out in all the different languages and all the different words that are ours to mortally use. But what's important is their hearts were one. They were one because there was only one source of what filled their heart. Today at the children's talk, I held up a symbol. And there were 4 hearts there that instantly knew what that meant. They each chose different words to express it. But they were one of heart. This past Thursday night, we did something special together. Whether or not you were able to attend the cathedral and the service of ordination in London, you were there. And I mean that. You, the community, were there. It wasn't the first time that this community has upheld someone to be ordained, and it won't be the last. I guarantee you that. It won't be the last. Oh, thank God for that. We recognized the ministry together, and we promised to uphold one another in conducting our ministries as children of God. What we did together was to share a common language of the heart in response to the Spirit. And in that way alone, it was an ordination. The infusion of the Spirit, making for a common heart. And after that, however you say it, is secondary. What we shared together, I put to you, was an act of surrender. I ask for this time together because it seems to me important that in this Pentecostal context of common heart, many voices, and one surrender, it's important that we share what ordination is, and just as importantly, what it is not. To do that, we need to look no further than the Gospels. Certainly our Pentecostal message today is clear about one heart, many voices. But we can also look to Jesus' own ministry at the moment of his baptism, his subsequent temptation, and his moving on into ministry. It began with his baptism, and he arrives at the River Jordan, and there's a little bit of a discourse with John the Baptist. Depending on which gospel version you read, it's, oh no, sorry, man, I'm not worth it, I can't baptize you. Yes, you can, no, I can't, yes, you can, no, I can't. No, come on, let's do it. So Jesus is immersed in the water, and he comes out, and the Father of all, before the ministry even starts, says what? This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. Before it even gets going, the love is there. At that instant, the heart speaks. And this is God's way, and Jesus' illumination for us, that every one of us, before, during, and after our ministry is over, we are loved by the Father unconditionally. And to the extent we can recognize that in faith, then we have a pipeline, we have a conduit through which grace can flow, and we can all receive the language of the heart, and be of common heart. Jesus subsequently goes into the temptation, which in our Lenten tradition has often been described as a time of deprivation and suffering. But there are 3 key things that happened during the 40 days and the temptation that relate to ministry that I want to share with you. The first is that Jesus is tempted by the dark one to change stones into bread, so that by doing so, his reputation could be spread as a miracle worker. The temptation that reputation might define his ministry. Jesus refuses it. Then the Spirit takes Jesus to the top of a steeple, a spire, and says, throw yourself down and let the angels save you. Do something wonderful. And in the doing of something, your ministry will be defined. Jesus says no. And finally, Satan takes Jesus to the highest point and surveys all of the riches and the reputation and the prestige that Satan himself claims to own and offers it to Jesus. If you would follow me, this can be yours. As though possessions or prestige could ever define a ministry. And Jesus pushes it back and says no. Did Jesus ever seek prestige or lay claim to any distinction that would separate him from those he served? No. Did he serve with any expectation of reciprocation or benefit? Quite the opposite. No. Did he go with the flow to safeguard his reputation before the Pharisees and the authorities of the day? No. Did he love only those who loved him in return? No. But did he or did he not yield to the Father when the language of the heart, the lingua corsa, summoned him? Yes, he did. So maybe now you understand a little bit of what I mean by ministry. Any ministry, whether it's Lisa's or Colin's or Rick's or Jean's or yours, more importantly yours, any ministry will not be defined by deeds, by reputation, or by distinctions that would divide us. Never. Our ministries can only be defined in one way. And that's by the ongoing hope that we speak to one another in the lingua cordis, that we change one another's hearts. What we shared on Thursday night was really a kind of pathetic plea for grace to help in the conduct of a ministry by one individual who was undeserving of this community, who had long since caved in and surrendered. But here's the good part. We're all in the same ministry together. We're all here because, to some extent, great or small, we have all surrendered to the Spirit. Even in a little way, you are not outside the boundaries of that. That's why you're here. And today, you're going to have an opportunity to open your heart wide to the Spirit, that it may enter your heart, and you too can listen to and speak the lingua corsa. So here's an invitation for us all. It's an invitation to lock yourself up in the joy of the gifts of your ministry as a prisoner of Christ. Surely this is what St. Paul meant when he repeatedly described himself as a prisoner of Christ. He's given in. He's given himself up. He's surrendered. The meaning of life is to identify the God-given gifts that each one of us hold. But the purpose of life is to give them away. Give them away to others. And to the extent that we do that, we live out our ministry. So lock yourself up. Lock yourself up in your ministries for Christ. And do me a favor. Throw away the key.